So here is a look at Mono-White Hatebears, the deck I'm going to be playing today. This is kind of a niche archetype of the format. I wouldn't say Hatebears is too popular right now. It's been around for a little while in various forms. This version is mono-white. I've also seen more popular the green-white version or black-white versions of Hatebears, but pretty happy with this current mono-white list. Just being able to play only one color in a deck definitely has its upside. And you see with the mana base, it's pretty consistent. There's a bunch of colorless lands which you can afford to play because you're only a single color. So we've got 3 copies of Tech Edge plus the 4 copies of Ghost Quarter as our mana denial lands. The Ghost Quarter in particular is very effective in this deck because we have a number of cards that stop our opponent from being able to search their library as they would like to. And then 2 copies of Mutavault as another bear, but it's just a bear as a land. And then Seagate Wreckage is a new land in the deck. And sometimes this deck is Hellbent, so being able to draw extra cards later in the game is really nice. And then all of these non-basics contribute to being able to activate the Singleton Eldrazi Displacer in the deck. Besides the non-basics, there's obviously going to be some white sources in the deck, a host of plains, plus 1 Ijanjo Castle, which works well with Thalia, and 1 Flagstones of Trocaire, which is nice with Ghost Quarter. There's not 4 copies in the deck because you want a bunch of planes to protect against Blood Moon. So, pretty happy with the mana base. And then, as far as the non-creature spells go in the deck, 4 copies of Path should come as no surprise. Currently, it's the best removal spell in Modern, most likely. Kills everything, and a lot of the times being able to exile creatures is important. Not only that, it's better in this deck than pretty much any other deck because we're playing cards that stop our opponent from searching their deck. So it's pretty much just remove target creature a lot of times, and there's no opportunity for searching for that basic land. This deck is an Aether Vial deck. The focus is on the creatures, the Hatebears, if you will. So there's not that many non-creature spells. Aether Vial helps put in these 2-mana creatures, or sometimes you'll be able to surprise your opponent with a 3-mana creature like a Flicker Wisp, a Blade Splicer, or even going up the curve to Restoration Angel. So Aether Vial not only helps you get your creatures into play, but sometimes they can come in as a surprise, and that can work out in your favor. The last of the 1-mana cards in the deck is Judge's Familiar, just another 1-drop, and a lot of the times it'll trade up with an opposing non-creature spell, so that's pretty nice. It's also a flyer. This deck wins in the air a lot of the time. So you see 3 copies of Sarah Avenger here as another flyer in the deck that is not an actual 2-drop because you can't cast it on 2, but you can vial it in on 3 or just simply hard cast it on turn 4 or later in the game. And it's one of the primary reasons to just be straight mono-white. Been pretty impressed with the card. 4 copies of Thalia, one of the signature Hatebears here, and it works well with the mana denial strategy that you're already deploying. And sometimes just making that non-creature spell cost 1 more means that it's uncastable. So 4 copies of Leonin Arbiter. I already mentioned earlier Ghost Quarter and Path to Exile. This card works extremely well with those cards. And it's also just a fine attacker. one Spellskite, which may seem a bit random in the deck, but actually vialing in Spellskite can come as a bit of a surprise to the opponent when they're using a removal spell, so it's pretty nice there. Then looking up the curve, we've got a couple Aven Mind Sensors, similar ideas to Leonin Arbiter. Sometimes your opponent will randomly find a basic off Ghost Quarter or Path, which is definitely annoying, but being a flying threat with Flash has its perks. So we've got 4 copies of Blade Splicer here. Blade Splicer is secretly one of the best creatures in the deck. It's not a card that sees play in that many archetypes in Modern. Here, it may just look like a 3-mana creature that's a 1/1 and produces a golem, but there's a few more synergies than that. A lot of the times you can blink Blade Splicer, which means that you're producing the original golem plus another golem once you blink it. And some of the ways to blink it are Flicker Wisp. Flicker Wisp can blink Blade Splicer or a number of your other cards, or it can blink an opposing card. So this is one of the more versatile bears, and it's also just a 3-mana, 3-power flyer. So Flicker Wisp can come into play off Aether Vial. It can blink a Kitchen Finks, which is a nice interaction there. And similar to Flicker Wisp, we have Restoration Angel, and we have Eldrazi Displacer. So we've got a bunch of ways to blink our own creatures, and that plays along with the idea of how good Blade Splicer is. And a lot of the times you do win just by blinking a Blade Splicer and getting value like that. I already mentioned a little bit Kitchen Finks. It's the only life gain card in the deck. There's only 2, because as you can see, there's a bunch of good 3-mana creatures that this deck has access to. But been pretty impressed with the Kitchen Finks overall, though it does get boarded out in a reasonable amount of matchups. And then we have a Sword of Fire and Ice here as the last of the non-creature spells. There's a lot of blue and red decks in the format right now, and you can just equip it to a flyer and get incredible advantages off the card once it does hit the opponent. It's almost more like a 5-drop, so it's really one of your late game spells is the Sword of Fire and Ice. And then 2 copies of Angel of Jubilation. This is not a card that sees basically any play in Modern, but it does see play in this deck, right? So it's really nice. It pumps not only your whole team, but also the Blade Splicer tokens. It's good against Malira Company because it stops the sacrificing of uses of Viscera Seer and stuff like that. And it's just a 4-mana 3/3 flyer that pumps the team and is very good if not immediately lightning bolted or removed in some other way. So the main deck is pretty concise, pretty straightforward. Got a few different singletons, but overall the game plan fits what a Hatebears deck is trying to do. The sideboard, you have a number of the best white cards that are sideboard cards in the format. There's 3 copies of Stony Silence, which helps shore up your affinity matchup and other artifact-based decks. Another copy of Spellskite against removal heavy decks or Infect. Then we have a couple Sunring Growths. Sunring Growth is here instead of Disenchant because it's another card that works well with the Blade Splicer because you can proliferate a Golem token. So that's a sweet interaction when it does come up. There's a core Firewalker, which is obviously for the red decks, the aggressive decks. 2 copies of Rest in Peace is against any type of Snapcaster Mage deck or graveyard-based combo deck. And Rest in Peace is actually shuts down a reasonable amount of strategies in this format, so it's been pretty impressive. Judge's Familiar comes in a lot of the times when Aether Vial comes out. Sometimes you don't want the vials, you just want more threats. especially against removal-heavy decks. And so you'll want to board in the Judge's Familiars there, even though sometimes it's just a 1-mana 1/1 flyer, but it can get the job done. And got a few more late-game cards. Dismember is just basically the 5th removal spell in the 75. We've got Mirror Crusader, which comes in against the various black and green decks of the format. It's not a main deck because it's primarily for black and green decks, but when your opponent is on those decks, it is very strong. And then we've got Crucible of Worlds, which works well with Ghost Quarter and Tech Edge to completely shut your opponent off of lands later in the game. And then a single copy of Revelark as a value creature that is very strong if you play it in any sort of attrition-based matchup. So, this is the Mono-White Hatebears deck, and pretty excited to get some games in with it.